Hello, hello. So, one thing that has long been speculated about is the pagan origins in Southwark. As you all know, I'm launching a new tour based in Southwark called Sinners, Saints, and Saviours. And the pagan origins are something that I do want to explore because it's very linked in with the herstory of this area and the herstories of this area. So, just behind me here, there's an image that is now in the Museum of London of a jug, a wine jug, it's believed to be. You can see it there, dating from the Roman era with an inscription in Latin on it there. You can just sort of make out it says London or Londinium, and it actually translates to the Temple of Isis. So it's long been thought that potentially there was a temple of Isis in Southwark or somewhere in Southwark. I'm going to take you to where it is believed to have been in those days on the tour. So behind me is an artist representation of what another Roman temple, the Tabard Temple, was believed to have looked like at the time, or something similar. And it's thought that the Isis temple may have been very similar to this. So I'll just move out the way so you can see it. So as you can see from this artist depiction, the landscape is very different. It was a lot more marshy and bog-like in Roman era London and Southwark than it is now, of course. And that is exactly how the Romans found it when they invaded and when they finally arrived in 43 AD and marched upon Southwark. So, who was the goddess Isis? There is a statue there, an ancient statue of Isis holding her son Horus. So, the goddess Isis, it kind of makes sense that there may be a temple of Isis in Southwark in particular. Because, Isis was an ancient Egyptian goddess. She was very important in the pantheon of gods and goddesses in ancient Egypt because she was like the mother goddess, and she was linked to the water. She was, and this was a town, Southwark, that was by the water, by the Thames. It's believed that the origin of the name, the River Thames, actually came from two words from the word Tamesis, which sounds similar. Obviously, it sounds almost like Isis. But there's lots of other, evidence to suggest that Isis may have been worshipped here, not least finding the pottery that actually has her inscription on it in the area. So Isis was, as I say, a mother goddess, but she was also believed to be a magical healer to bring people back from the dead. She was also linked to fertility in connection with that. And healing the sick and all of these kind of magical and very wholesome properties and characteristics. And, the mythology, the actual myth story of Isis is quite unique. She was married, of course, to Osiris, and she was a deity. Osiris was the king of Egypt, and she was the queen. And he, of course, had a vengeful and jealous brother called Seth, who was another deity that in the Egyptian, images and pictograms, it shows him as having a head of a jackal. So Seth gets very jealous and wants to claim the throne for himself. So he basically tricks Osiris into getting into a casket that he then lines with lead, and he then dumps into the Nile. So obviously basically leading Osiris to his death. Because Osiris has disappeared, Seth can then, as the brother, claim the throne. But Isis, of course, being Osiris's wife, she is desperate to find him and to know what happened to him. And she eventually recovers his body in the casket and brings it back to Egypt because it's now no longer in Egypt. And of course, Seth, in mad fury, hacks up Osiris's body into 1,000 pieces, and then he scatters them all over the country. And then, of course, in the myth, Isis, because she's supernatural, she's a deity, she transforms into a bird and she gathers all the pieces of her husband and puts them back together. In earlier myths of the story, she found his penis as well, but I find it really amusing that in later, and telling actually, that in later retellings of the myth, she finds everything except his penis. And I think that's because the phallus is believed to represent, the power of the man. And so she bandages him up, and he is no longer able, he's not human, but he is now sort of like trapped as the god of the underworld. And it's very reminiscent, of course, of the ancient Egyptian mummification practices. As part of this as well, she miraculously becomes pregnant and, gives birth to Horus. And then she has to conceal Horus from Seth because she knows that he will be a threat to Seth and Seth will try to kill him. So she raises the child and keeps him in hiding until he's old enough to avenge his father. And of course, that then leads on to other myths of the battles between Horus and Seth, and Horus ultimately being victorious. So, the fact that Isis is in the myth, obviously the perfect wife and mother who is defending her husband and her son, protecting them, healing them, healing her husband and literally putting him back together, and then miraculously making herself pregnant. And, her connection with being the mother goddess and obviously healing the sick and all of these magical things, particularly the Immaculate Conception, might sound familiar to you. Maybe this kind of little known story. Yeah, Mother Mary and Jesus there, right? It is believed that, the ancient Egyptian stories influenced the Bible. And of course, Isis being no exception here. Isis was the mother goddess and she probably directly influenced the stories of Mary and her Immaculate Conception and her protection and devotion to Jesus, who then went on to be a great leader, just like Horus. And the fact that, I think it makes a lot of sense in terms of Southwark, because if there was indeed a temple of Isis in Southwark, what later happened after the Roman Empire in the medieval era is there was a church that was called St. Mary Overy, which is believed to refer, of course, to Mother Mary. Although there is another origin story for that as well, which I'm going to talk about on the tour. But it would make sense, I imagine, that there was originally a pagan temple to Isis and later it became dedicated to Mother Mary, just simply changing the name. So was there an Isis cult in Southwark? Well, I've presented some evidence here, so it's kind of up to you really to assess it and see what you think. I also talk more about this histories and myths on my new tour, Sinners, Saints and Saviours, which is going to be launching on the weekend of the 24th of May. And there are 2 dates, the 24th and the 26th, where you can book tickets. This will be a theatrical exploration of the myth of Isis and her connection to Southwark. But just to end on something that has been sort of linked as well to the idea of there being a goddess Isis cult in Southwark is the existence of the very modern Shard. So, the Shard, the tallest building in Western Europe, it's now, of course, a tourist destination. If you look at the shape of the Shard, it's a big, tall shard of glass, as it were. And it's very phallic, actually. It almost looks like an obelisk, which obelisks are believed to refer to the phallus as well, and they go back into antiquity. And there is that connection with Isis, Isis being a fertility goddess, a mother goddess, and in the myth, bandaging back together her husband, and in some versions not finding his penis or fashioning herself a penis. So, make of that what you will. Is the Shard a kind of latter-day clue to the Isis cult, or a remembering of the Isis cults, lest we forget? But anyway, if you'd like to learn more, do come along to Sinners, Saints and Saviours, where you will be entertained and learn a lot about this very fascinating history. Thank you very much. Link in bio. Thank you.